So far,
Hey,
it's
Laura.
pretty amazing given what's going on all around us in the world. But yeah, and
We're very lucky to be in our little pocket.
it's just something to be commented on every day. Really amazing. Hi, folks.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Lisa.
Uh-oh. Lisa, I think, is in a parking lot where she gets better Wi-Fi service. And here we go.
She might be stuck there for a minute.
I'm going to leave the screen too, but I'll be right back. Hold on.
So Laura, I'm going to do what I usually do. I'm also going to call in so that I'll do my audio this way, but then I can
Okay.
kind of see you guys.
Okay, sounds
So you'll
good.
see my phone number coming in here in just a second.
All right.
Just mute your computer, Chris, otherwise it gets that really high-pitched screech.
I'm good. I'm in a meeting. Sorry. Bye.
So Lisa, do you not get any internet at your house?
No, I do. It's just that it's really spotty. I mean, it was fine. I just, like last time, it would break up on me and I couldn't hear. And so I thought that this might work better. The only problem is that this is a little bit more social. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not here to chat with anybody.
You may want to be on mute until you want to speak, just because I can hear some wind in the background once we get
Okay.
started.
I can do that.
Or you can just turn the wind off.
Yeah, that's good, Joel. If she can figure that out, then we're all in the wrong place.
Just turn the fan, right? So, oh, gosh. Well, Bobby Joe was mentioning how fortunate we all are. Anybody have any doubts about that?
No.
Just amazing. Just amazing. We've had visitors in the form of family. My daughter and her kids been over here from Maine, and they dropped the kids here for 2 weeks.
Wow. Good for
Which
you.
was really cool. And my other daughter, who teaches in Boston, and who is scared to death of going back into a classroom, was up here for a week. And now we have our niece who teaches in New York City up here, not with us, but with her parents down in Moncton. And we do live in a bubble here. I haven't met anybody as scared as she is.
My sister lives and works in New York City too.
Yeah, they are.
And is very, very.
Their life has changed. They just think more. It's not paranoid. They are just scared.
Yeah, and they have people. I mean, they can count the number of people that have died that they know, and they, they talked about last, this spring when their guidance was talking about funeral arrangements, talking to kids about funeral arrangements. That's just not
crazy.
Yeah. Anyway,
it's not right.
Definitely relate.
I've got all sorts of papers in front of me, so half of this meeting I'm going to be looking down. Don't take any offense at it. That must be somebody I don't know yet.
It's John.
Are you John or Jonathan?
John is fine. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm Joel. And Joel is fine.
Not Christine then.
No, that would be my wife.
Now you come on as Christine, just so you know.
Yeah, I know that. She owns everything around here.
Well, nice to meet you. I can't say in person, but.
I understand. Well, someday we should get together, even if it's 6 feet apart.
Right.
I'd appreciate that, and it would be good for everybody. Anyhow, how long you been on the job since? Literally July 1st, or?
July 1, that's right.
Okay. Well, we'll give. I won't pepper you with questions now. You'll have your 10 minutes in the sun when we get underway.
I don't know. I don't know if I'll need 10, but
That's fine. That's fine. We've got a lot to do, and I don't know, Laura, how we came up with a 2-hour time frame here.
That was what Tracy or Zach or both had available.
Well, we'll see. But
They're in the midst of trying to open schools in a very changing landscape. And even though we're fortunate, there's a lot of work to do. So,
don't I know it? It's just, I don't see how we're opening schools here. When you look at the last several days, our case count has gone up between 0.5% and 1% each day. That's,
well, if we can't do it, we can show the country how to do it thoughtfully is my hope.
Mm-hmm. We'll find out.
I think Vermont is better at leading. We're a small enough community. We know each other. I think we do things thoughtfully. So I'm hoping that we can pull this off, but it certainly is a challenging.
Well, I agree with everything you just said. But it's more hope than expectation.
Well, right. We've got to wait and see.
Yeah.
So we need Peggy, Zach, and Tracy, the active employed school system people. I don't know if Peggy's back at school yet or not, but I'm assuming that they are trying to get off of one task to move to this one.
Hi, Mark.
hello.
Oh, Peggy says she can't find the link and to send it again, so let me work on that.
Well, at least she's on the case. Okay. Well, we'll get through what we can.
I'm going to mute for a second here.
All right. Oh, and rounding out my summer, my son and daughter-in-law had a little baby on July 6th, and they live in Milton, so we've been seeing them twice a week. So, cute little thing. Just not my son, the daughter, the granddaughter.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, Zach.
That doesn't look like Peggy at all. Hi, Zach. among other things. Hey, Jeff.
Hello.
We'll do introductions later. But John, meet Jeff. Jeff Fannin, meet John.
Hi, John.
Hello.
We'll figure it all out. And so right now it's just Tracy and Peggy. And now it's just, and Lisa's back. Good. Are you back, Lisa? Good. Well, we can't hear you because you probably pushed the mute at Laura's suggestion.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Lisa, for the rest of you, is outdoors, and apparently the wind blows in the Newport area. Are you in Newport?
No, I'm actually in Newark, Vermont.
Newark. All right.
Yeah.
That's a place in Vermont, John, not Newport.
Yeah.
Or Delaware, for that matter.
Yeah.
Newark.
And there's more traffic here than I could imagine.
What, a car?
Yeah, 3 cars have gone by. I didn't.
That's amazing.
300 people here.
Oh, gosh. Well, let's see. It's not possible to have a quorum without Tracy.
Is Peggy on the phone? I just want to.
Peggy's trying. Peggy.
And Tracy, and Peggy emailed me and I had to forward her the link again. Chris Roberts is on the phone.
Okay. Well, actually, Chris is right there.
Yeah, but she also.
Yeah, but
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
my
Whatever.
audio doesn't work. So
Whatever.
if I want to hear you, I do this, and then I see you through that.
All right. Whatever works. When I screw up, just remind me. All right. Well, Peggy's actively trying, so is that right, Laura, as far as you know?
Yeah, I haven't heard back from her since I've communicated over email.
And that was like 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
All right, we'll try. While we've got a moment, Tracy, did you get my email from this earlier this afternoon?
I did. I haven't spent
Okay.
any time with it.
You haven't what?
Spent any time with it.
Okay. then it's as though you didn't receive it because it's for
I
this
can
meeting.
see there's one there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and there's Peggy. All right. Did we lose anybody? Just Jeff, and he can wait. Okay. Then let's convene our meeting at 4:02, which is not bad. And review the agenda and then just proceed as we can. I just want to restate in about 5 seconds. I think the time frames within which we've set things is quite unrealistic. And so we'll go as far as we can. If any of us has to leave exactly at 6, it'll be helpful at some point to know that if it looks like we're going to be running over 6 otherwise. Actually, why don't I ask that? Does anybody have to leave at 6? Huh?
I would.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you, Tracy. I'm not sure what to do about it.
Yes, I need to leave at 6.
Okay, well then we'll get through what we can get through. Okay. Is there any changes anybody wants to offer to the agenda? Seeing none, I guess we will adopt the agenda as printed. In terms of public comment, the only person I'm aware of who will be joining us from outside of VEHI itself, are John, until he takes his position with us within the VEHI family directly, and Jeff Fannin from Vermont NEA, who I'll recognize later on when we get to the Vermont NEA, the service agreement with Vermont NEA. Approval of the minutes from June 8th. There are a couple of matters. There's a reference to a uniform process for handling requests to attach documents to the minutes, about which, Tracy, it would be helpful if you'd think through what I asked you about this afternoon. But otherwise, I will ask for, and I have one myself, ask for any proposed changes in the June 8th minutes. Seeing none, I'll raise the one that I've raised with Laura and Tracy and the staff generally before. And I don't have the minutes right in front of me. I guess I could get them if I move the Zoom off to the right here. But there is a discussion in the minutes of various motions associated with the service agreement, and the minutes read that I and Peggy produced a motion that would increase the allocation to Vermont NEA by a specific percentage. And I think it was 13.4% in the minutes. That wasn't the motion. The motion was to adopt for Vermont NEA service agreement the amount, the specific amount specified in the Vermont NEA proposal. And so my request is that we amend the sentence in which that appears. It's in the 3rd paragraph of the section on the agreement, is that Joel moved to amend the motion, seconded by Peggy, to provide a payment of $216,592 without any reference to a percent. Is there any objection? So adopted. Thank you. I'm unaware of any other minutes, any other matter related to the June 8th minutes themselves. So moving on, there is a proposal, there's a draft proposal in the board materials. In January, I think it was, Tracy suggested that we adopt at some point, or discuss adopting standards for materials attached to the minutes. And in July, I guess, she renewed that request for this agenda, and I suggested that she put her pen to paper and draft some standards. I personally do not expect us to reach a conclusion about this evening, but we should have at least an initial discussion unless we advance further. Laura, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it took me forever to unmute. I couldn't find my button. Usually we actually have a motion to approve the minutes with the amendment.
All right.
You want us, I mean,
I have no objection to doing so. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Peggy, seconded.
I'll second.
Zach, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we've approved the minutes. Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry for behaving in my way and not your way. It's really the way it is. Did I see another hand go up while I was talking? No. All right. We have just a few minutes. Tracy, if you want to go ahead and make a presentation about these standards, you can. I need to add that there was also a request initially by Tracy regarding attaching a March 13th memo from her. And I followed that up as in the materials with I forget when I wrote it, but in July or August, memo requesting that memo be accompany hers wherever it might go. If it's attached to the minutes, so be it. If not, so be it.
Yeah.
And I wrote her an email this afternoon touching on the relationship between her proposed standards and those two documents. Tracy, go ahead.
So actually my proposal is quite simple, and I don't think it would be challenging for the board to adopt such a protocol with a very short consideration, since really it is a protocol that just affirms normal good board practice for meeting minutes and for the inclusion and availability for documentation related to what boards consider and how board members communicate. And the proposal is simple. It's an end to the emergent practice of attaching dueling documents to minutes, either at the time, at the date at which the original document was proposed and attached, whether it be by motion of the board or decree of the board chair, and agreeing that in some circumstances it might be useful for transparency and for the public for a report to be attached to the board minutes. Of course, reports are always public documents that are, or almost always, that are available if requested or needed. And of course, our important reports are shared with our constituents and stakeholders as part of our ongoing work to be transparent. But once in a while, it might be really important to attach a report to the minutes, and it might be appropriate to do so. Further, clarifying that management and members also do not have the right to request that their correspondence be attached to the minutes. The purpose of minutes is to record the official business of the board and not necessarily be a reflection of the differing opinions of individual board members or their recollections or perceptions as we work towards board consensus and board action. So my recommendation is simple, and that is that we follow these that we agree to follow this protocol, as I believe that the protocol is both equitable and reasonable and a reflection of the board's commitment to best practice as far as governance.
Are you presenting this in the form of a motion?
Sure, I move that we approve the VEHI board protocol on attachments to minutes as proposed.
Can you cite it as a draft and the date that it was proposed and its author?
Which was drafted by Tracy Rend and proposed for board consideration on August 18th, 2020 at 4:11 p.m.
All right, you don't have to go crazy over it. I was just trying to get it identified properly, since there's no identifying feature on the document itself. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? I have a basic question, Tracy, as you know. What would be the import of adopting these standards today on your request regarding your March 13th memo?
Well, I would take the opportunity to note that while other memos by other people have been attached to the minutes by request of the board chair or by motion of the board, my communications have not. However, nonetheless, I would forego.
Can I ask you not to do that? If you're going to challenge integrity at this meeting by Zoom, we will never get through the business of the day. Try just to answer the question that was made. What is the import of adopting these standards on your request regarding the March 13th?
Could you please not interrupt me when I'm giving the
I
answer?
will interrupt you if you engage in that sort of behavior, as you have been well informed for the last 2 years.
As a board member, I'm entitled to be able to share my opinion and explain the context and background for my opinion. And I understand that others may disagree, but I would welcome a respectful opportunity to participate fully as a member of the board.
Tracy, as you know, I feel when I'm shown respect, I give respect. I give respect well into the depths of other behavior. My question stands. What is the import of the standards you're asking us to adopt on how to handle the March 13th memo that you have requested to be added to the minutes?
What I am saying, what I began saying, Joel, is that despite an inconsistent history of how we have considered memos in the past, if you would have let me finish, I am willing to let go further discussion of prior memos.
All right. I have other comments about the proposed standards. Does anybody else want to weigh in?
I just generally, I've never been on a board. This is a new experience for me where the memos seem to be kind of like the post-game commentary on what happened in the course of the meeting. And here's my perspective. And I feel like my experience has been that is in the minutes is the place for that to occur. And if there needs to be a follow-up to a previous conversation and a feeling that something was misinterpreted, then that probably should be part of an agenda for the board in the future, as opposed to kind of the dueling memo thing. And I don't know, maybe other people, this is an experience. I mean, this is common practice in other places, but this is not a practice I'm familiar with, and not one I'm entirely comfortable with, because I feel like it potentially never ends. We keep having the yeah but memos that go back and forth, and I feel like it's really not that productive.
I couldn't agree more.
So, okay, go ahead.
No, I apologize for cutting you off. I agree 100%. There are differences between the purposes of different writings, and those that seek to incriminate board members or defend us it seems to me, don't belong in the minutes, but to the extent that they've been attached to minutes, then the responses get attached. This particular episode started, and look, we're going to take a long time on this today. I don't think so. I just want to say this. This particular episode began with what I consider to be a lapse in the November 2019 minutes, which I pointed out. That's what it was. I believe I was right. If you'll read the memo that I have submitted to you guys in response to Tracy's, you'll see why I say it. The minutes are not, the actions of this board are not purely those that follow the making of formal motions. We had an agreement in the November meeting. By state law, minutes are supposed to reflect all proposals and how they are, whatever the word in the law is, however they're treated. This issue was not treated in the minutes, and so I did what I did, and then to be blunt, all hell broke loose. That being said, I will say that I'm simply not prepared to act on this particular format of this particular draft at this particular time. And I'd be happy to have us defer action on it, but come back to it immediately, because it's a worthy subject for inclusion in our protocols. I disagree with Tracy's statements, or sort of unadorned statement that this reflects good practice. as though nothing else does reflect good practice. And so we have to sort that stuff out. So my recommendation is to table this motion and come back to it at the next business meeting. If I have to move to that effect, I'll move to that effect. So, is there any disagreement?
Yeah.
I get, yes. What's complicated about this request?
Well, this is what's complicating it. We have less than 2 hours left. Tracy has to leave at 6. We have more important things to do. We can agree sitting here not to attach anything further to the minutes until this is resolved. But trying to resolve it here and now is going to take an extended period of time that I don't think it's worth this board dealing with. If you want to disagree with that, that's fine. That's fine, and we'll go ahead.
So let's just call the question.
Well, calling the question will likely result in a defeat of the motion. Why would we do that? I move to table.
I don't think you can move to table after the question's been called.
It hasn't been called. That was a suggestion. I move to table.
Is that true, Tracy? You did not call the question?
Well, I at least appreciate.
Laura, please don't question the chair. Your staff. Your staff. In this context, please. I'm in a hurry because everybody else is in a hurry. I could do this all day.
So
But we
my
can't do
intent
it.
was to call the question.
And my intent was to table the question before you called the question. So if you want to argue about that, let's argue about that. If you want to defeat the motion, I don't care. We'll leave things as they are. And then we can get into a dispute over the March 13th and the other memo.
Duly noted. There are several other board members whose voices could and should be heard, so I'd like to call the question.
How do you hear other board members if you call the question?
They get to vote.
Okay. All right. I'll yield. All in favor? Well, all in favor of a motion to call the question is a motion, right? It requires a vote. Is there a second? You don't think so? I don't. I'm asking. I don't know. Laura is shaking her head no.
My understanding is if you call the question, you have to hold the vote without any discussion.
Anybody can call the question?
Yep. Anyone who's entitled to vote can call the question.
So what are we doing? Voting on whether to call? We're voting on the motion?
Yes.
All right. I'll do it. I disagree. All in favor of Tracy's proposal as identified by Tracy regarding board protocol and attachment to minutes, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Nay.
Okay.
Nay.
It was an exercise worthy. Okay. So that leaves us with the opportunity to have a further discussion about whether to attach to the minutes of this meeting, the March 13th memo and my follow-up memo. I need to hear a motion to do so, or we will move on. Hearing none, we will move on. John, I hate to, introduce you to the VEHI board in that manner, but I'm sorry for that. It was rare, if ever, an occurrence in the first 17 years of this organization's existence. Jonathan Steiner is the new VISBIT president, which means he will have ongoing and certainly for the time being, developing relationship with all of us. And I will yield the floor to you, John, who I understand you call yourself John. My best childhood friend was Jonathan and insisted on being known as Jonathan. So I will yield the floor.
Can I jump in first?
I will yield the floor to John for a period of time. He said he wouldn't take 10 minutes, but I hope he does. Laura?
Yeah,
Laura.
so I thought since John is my replacement, that I would introduce him and welcome him to the board. I announced my retirement about almost a year ago, I guess 10 months ago, to the VISBIT board, and they did an extensive search. Started just before COVID. We were lucky actually that COVID did not derail a series of excellent applicants. And I was insistent and the board agreed that we have a significant overlap of duties. So John was hired, started July 1st. Will work with myself and Bobby Joe and others till the end of 2020 when I actually do retire. And Bobby Joe and John and I will figure out the best way to manage roles. John will not just do all of the things I did. He will primarily be Vice President and support VEHI through that role. We're thrilled to have him. He has 30 years experience working with municipalities and pools, and I'll
He
let
doesn't look that old.
him take it from here. So go ahead, John.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Joel. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I started July 1. And just to give you a little idea of my background, most of my career, 20 years, was with the New Hampshire League of Cities in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Municipal Association. And I worked in the insurance side. We had schools in that program, also with Health Trust, which was schools, counties, and towns and cities. And then from there, I went, I was the CEO of the Kentucky League of Cities. Kentucky League of Cities, again, had an insurance program and a league and lobbying operation. And so I started a health pool there. I had a school pool that we ran for multi-line, so a lot of school experience. During my time in New Hampshire, I was a school board member at Kearsarge Regional High School, and I was also vice president of the New Hampshire School Boards Association. So I've always been involved in schools in my personal life as well as my work life. And to round it out, my wife is involved in education as well. She just took a job with SAU 70. She will be the assistant superintendent in SAU 70. So
Where's SAU 70?
that's Hanover, Norwich, Dresden. So little New Hampshire, little Vermont. And so as Laura said, with COVID, and complicated things, moving and starting, but fortunately we had a little camp that we had kept in New Hampshire, which is within commuting distance of Vermont. So I've set up shop here for now. And once we sell our house in Kentucky, and we will start looking for something closer between Norwich and Berlin and make that move. So lots of exciting things going on. I'm looking forward to working with everybody. Laura's been great as far as involving me in decisions and giving me lots of background. And so I'm glad to be here. This is a great move. I'm really happy.
Good.
Welcome.
Then we're fortunate you did. Where in Kentucky were you? In Frankfurt?
I was in Lexington.
Lexington.
Yeah, the office was in Lexington. We had a small office in Frankfurt for the lobbying team.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for keeping it brief. And we'll move on. The next item I think is pretty basic, and I'll yield to Laura regarding setting the date and time of the annual meeting.
Thank you. So we usually have our annual meeting the end of October in conjunction with the Lake Maury Conference of Superintendents and School Board Members. They will not be holding that conference this year. Sorry, I didn't mean to shut off my video.
That's okay. Glad you noticed. Go ahead.
Well, I thought maybe I shut off my video instead of turn on my audio and was talking to myself. So, so it seems the best course of action is to attach our annual member meeting to the October 20th meeting that we already set. We picked October 20th because we need to set the health rates that week in order to file with DFR in a timely manner. So we've already set a meeting for October 20th of the board at 5 o'clock. And my suggestion is you hold the annual meeting at that same time, starting at 5. We'll hold it by Zoom. We will make sure that, people have access to the meeting. I frankly don't expect a lot of people to take the time out of their day considering all the dynamics that superintendents and school boards are dealing with, and the fact that there's no particular topic or action that they need to take, but I may be wrong. We'll certainly welcome and encourage them to attend. The last 2 years, I think the annual meeting has taken, even in person, maybe 15 minutes. So I think that still gives you plenty of time to do your health rating to follow that meeting. So if that works, then you've got a notice of meeting in the packet. We would close the member books as of October 9th. That means if you're a member as of that date, you have a right to vote. And we'll hold the meeting October 20th at 5. If you want to change that and have a separate date, if you want to change the time and meet 15 minutes earlier, you're obviously welcome to do that. We do need a decision today because we have to give notice and warning to the members, according to bylaws. We also need to appoint a corporate secretary today. John was the corporate secretary and he has left the board. And we do need the one duty that no one else can do except for the corporate secretary is to certify that the members were appropriately warned of the notice of the meeting. And Lisa works with the corporate secretary to do that.
I have a question then, Tracy. My question is, would starting the annual meeting on the 20th later in that time frame potentially add to the participation level? Would more people be likely to tune in at around 6 or so than at 5? It seems logical to me, but I don't know what you think. I guess I'm asking Laura.
So you said Tracy, so I wasn't answering.
No, and Tracy wants to speak, but my question's first. That's all, because it was.
I don't know, but I will tell you that it will be really hard to guarantee people a start time if you do it in the middle of a meeting.
Oh no, we would just break the meeting.
Delay the start of the meeting till 6 o'clock. It may, but I don't know if people can meet later. That was
Laura, I'm not sure what's. I'm saying we can start at 5, but we will break for the annual meeting at a specific later time during that time frame.
Yeah, you may be in the middle of the health. You're going to have to deal with the health and dental rates, both of which are complex topics that are hard to break in the middle. That's my point. It's not a typical meeting where you could say, "We'll stop." You're making the most critical decision that you'll make all year in setting the health rates.
And what about 6:30? It's not a big deal here. I'm just suggesting that if we want people to attend our annual meeting, we ought to do something that encourages their attendance. That's all.
Can I chime in? I have it on my calendar as starting at 4. Is that correct?
So, do I have it wrong on my notice? I'm sorry.
I think it's at 5 in my calendar.
Yeah, mine too. Says
And let me
Five
tell you,
to seven.
I didn't put it in my calendar. You guys did. So
My,
October 20th,
5 to 7.
5 to 7 is what's there. Again, it's your meeting. If it can be a different time, that's fine with me.
so my challenge is that last night, my board switched its regular meeting times to Tuesday nights. They start their meetings at 5:30.
Oh,
So I have competing demands on my time.
that's good to know. And is that what you wanted to comment on? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well,
We have to meet that week to set the health rates. And the night of the 22nd, I'm booked, just so you know.
well. All right, so if I'm understanding this correctly, we shouldn't meet on the 20th in the late afternoon for Tracy's purposes. And
Can we meet earlier in the day? Again, Joel, and I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if the time of day will make a huge difference for people's
Yeah.
attendance.
Yeah.
It may well, but I don't know what time would be best. Superintendents might prefer during the day. I don't know. School board members might prefer after 7.
yeah, all right. Well, I tried, and I don't have an opinion. I just had a question about it. So we can't meet. I guess we would need to adjourn by about 5, Tracy. Is that right? If we meet that day.
Yeah, and if we did the meeting at the annual meeting at 5 and it sticks to the 15-minute norm, I'll be fine transitioning. And if it runs long, I'll just need to step out at 5:25.
But you couldn't stay for a regular board meeting, Tracy, after the annual meeting at 5.
I could not.
That's the point.
So could we start the meeting at 3 and have an annual meeting at 5?
Peggy's teaching.
I like that idea.
It'll be Zoom.
Peggy? Not yet.
I was trying to think about, are we talking about a Tuesday still?
Tuesday, 20th, if we started at 3 on Zoom, so there'd be no travel time.
Peggy's a teacher.
Yeah, I can make something work. It's just with the way we're starting, I may have only
Who
seen the
knows?
days by then. So who knows? Maybe I'll be home and Zooming. Who knows? Yeah, I'll make it work.
For the other active educator in the group. Zach, what do you think?
No, I can make that earlier slot. Right now, I've got flexibility, and if we had to move to Wednesday, I also have a decent amount of flexibility on Wednesday as well. So I can do either one of those two. Monday's problematic for me.
Okay. Well,
Wednesday would work for me as well.
okay, but there's no reason to think Tuesday doesn't work the way we've just described it, from 3 to 5 with the annual meeting at 5. All right. We should leave well enough alone. Laura, as Laura indicated, we have to provide formal notice of the annual meeting. And we can't just give an alternate. I don't think we can give a rain date like that. So, all right. Well, I think we've resolved this, Laura. We'll move the business meeting to 3 o'clock and the annual meeting at 5.
Yeah, I do need a motion on the annual meeting. It will set the date and time and the date and time of closing the books.
All right. Well, and the books would be closed a different.
October 9th.
That's a second motion, right?
Oh, you can do it all in one motion.
All right. I think Tracy moved, but so Laura, you have to word that for her.
So the motion is to set the date and time of the annual meeting to be October 20th, 2020 at 5 p.m. The meeting will be held remotely, and the membership books will close as of October 9th, 2020.
When you say as of, you mean the end of business?
Yes.
Okay.
And- yep.
Is there a second?
Materials. Yep.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, and we have adopted the annual meeting date and the date to close the membership books. Now, in terms of appointing a corporate secretary, you mean just at this point for purposes of the minutes, Laura?
So I need a corporate secretary in September to sign off on the annual meeting notice, according to the bylaws. I can't meet.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I get it. Okay.
For convenience, I'm happy to nominate Zach if he would be willing to accept that.
I'm sure a lot of people are fighting for that title. So,
Well, if you're
I
nominated,
mean, I like the level of job expectation. It seems right about par for me. So I am willing to accept said nomination if that works for people. But
is that your self-nomination speech? Or?
I'm sure it's bringing tears to people's eyes. So.
All right. Let's see. Sitting here, I can't remember. How's the secretary elected?
It is appointed
Appointed.
by the board.
Appointed by the full
Chair,
board.
vice chair,
All
all
right. Well, I will.
president,
All right.
Chris has her hand up.
Oh, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Just one quick housekeeping item. The only other thing I want to be complete full disclosure, as the secretary, that is the alternate check signer. So if you accept that position, you would need to work with People's Bank. If you don't have an account to People's Bank, that means you have to go and visit them to get set up as a check signer. Just want to say that.
This job is sounding worse all the time. I'm still open to it. If people,
Zach, can we limit this so that it extends only until the annual meeting?
Well, you'll reorganize at the annual meeting anyway.
Well, I guess therefore, then what I just said is accurate. This is a limited term, a limited service contract, Zach. Okay. The motion is to designate Zach as our secretary of the corporation until the annual meeting. Is there? I don't know if we need a second, but I'll ask for a second just in case. Is there a second? Zach, you want to second? Peggy seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Not you, Zach. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. The next item has to do with a settlement agreement regarding pharmacy benefits, and I will tell you that I'm responsible not for the item itself, but for its appearance on the agenda. I was asked if it made sense for me simply to sign off on this settlement agreement, and I said to myself, I'm the only person on the board who knows anything about this, and it just seemed like the board should have some education behind it before authorizing me to sign on the dotted line. So I will yield to whichever of you, Bobby, Joe, Mark, or Laura, I should.
Bobby Joe, we said you do pharmacy. You want to take it?
Sure, that was a sneak attack. All right.
You're up, kiddo. All right.
I'm probably, yeah. Actually, one of you, I'm probably the least versed in this one.
I'm happy to take it.
Sorry.
You
Sorry.
have, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. There's obviously a long document, actually not that long, a one-pager with a fair amount of detail in the board packet. The best part of it is the first sentence that has a figure of $618,162. That is an amount of money that ESI Incorporated, our pharmacy benefit manager, actually Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont's pharmacy benefit manager, who also serves us, has agreed to pay as the result of a long auditing and negotiation process that concluded with ESI acknowledging, if you will, that it had not honored discount guarantees that it was required to pay us under the contract the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont had negotiated with it, and that contract is monitored not only by Blue Cross, but also by Remedy Analytics, which did an audit in 2017, followed by another audit by Blue Cross. Those two audits were reconciled, and the two parties agreed that ESI owed us money. That then set in motion the negotiations with ESI, and long story short, and this story did take a while, we finally received, or will be receiving, a check of $618,162 from ESI.
And that's it.
That's pretty much it.
Just to be clear, we get the money from Blue Cross. ESI pays Blue Cross. Blue Cross gives us our share. And by signing the settlement, you're agreeing that's the complete and final amount, and we're done.
We're not going to go back for more.
Not for this
Not
period
for
of
this
time.
particular period of time.
Correct.
The three of us, Bobby Joe underestimates herself, but I did blindside her there. The three of us concur that this is the correct amount.
Okay.
The three of us, let me just qualify that. The three of us have agreed that we'll accept this amount. Whether it's the proper amount or not remains to be seen. It's the product of negotiations with both sides having differing opinions about what the contract said, what was owed. But we've agreed to accept this amount that was, again, the product of a negotiation.
All right. I won't ask a series of questions about what level of discomfort there may have been left, but if you're all in agreement,
We are.
I doubt that I certainly am in no position to suggest otherwise. Is there a motion to approve this settlement agreement?
So moved.
Tracy, second.
Second.
Zach, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we have done it. And I didn't sign this in advance, did I?
No.
All right.
So when you have a chance, you can get that to me. Thank you, Joel.
Yeah. Oh, it's right. You don't know that it's right in front of me on my screen here. Yes, I know how to find it. You may have to remind me, but that's all. Okay.
Don't get the money till Blue Cross gets the memo.
All right. Okay. All right. We are at that point in the agenda, which feels like Groundhog's Day a bit to me. I would like to open the discussion of the Vermont NEA VEHI service agreement with my own opening statement and the information that I sent you all this afternoon, whether you've been able to see it or not. And it'll take me a few minutes. And then we'll open the discussion by inviting Jeff Fannin from Vermont NEA to make what presentation he may have for us, and we'll move on from there. All right? So this will take me about 4 minutes, I think. This board, and I'll be looking down at my paper because I prepared it so that I wouldn't blither on and on. This board has failed on multiple occasions to reach a successful conclusion to funding for VEHI's service agreement with Vermont NEA. The discussions have had two prongs. One was the nature and quality of the services and how Vermont NEA has reported about them. I won't review that prong in any detail. I will say the board has all the evidence it needs, from Vermont NEA's required evaluations of its own services to the absence of any evidence to the contrary, to conclude there is no proper lingering concern by anyone on this score. The other prong, of course, has been about what VEHI pays Vermont NEA for those services. Ever since VEHI started up in the 90s, it has paid Visbit and Vermont NEA for their services. It has always paid Visbit what Visbit submitted to VEHI as the actual cost of its services, as approved by this board. Until fiscal 18, VEHI paid Vermont NEA what Vermont NEA submitted to VEHI as the actual cost of its services, also as approved by this board. That all changed, but only for what VEHI pays Vermont NEA, beginning in fiscal 18. At that point, Tracy led a change that resulted in a major reduction in what we pay Vermont NEA. She tied that change to a reduction in the range of services for which VEHI would pay, and her conclusion, without known evidence to me at any rate, that Vermont NEA spent less time on those services than it reported. So for fiscal 2018, at least it could be said, VEHI paid Vermont NEA in part the actual cost of services VEHI approved. But there was no change at all provided Vermont NEA for fiscal 19. That is, the former VEHI board made no adjustment for any change in the actual cost of Vermont NEA services. And that brings us to the serial discussions we have had over fiscal 20 and future funding. At best, our discussions, in my view, have been dissonant. On the one hand, Tracy Rand has made several proposals providing incremental percentage increases for either fiscal 2020 or 2021. On the other hand, Vermont NEA has presented specific calculations of the actual cost of its services, no different in approach from what Visbit has presented. Actually, without going into detail here, with a bit more specificity even than Visbit has. And I'll review the chart that I provided to elaborate on this, just so I would like everybody to have the same numbers that I've been looking at. The question that must be resolved is whether this board, in deciding what it will pay for its partners' services, will continue to ignore the actual cost of services provided by one of its partners, while routinely, appropriately, but routinely agreeing to adhere to the actual cost of services provided by the other. I do not believe VEHI is respected for the approach to this issue it adopted in recent years. I believe in fairness, and I presume we all do. The chart, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but it's this thing that I sent this afternoon. And what it shows is the history over the last year plus of the variety of proposals that we've encountered about the Vermont NEA VEHI Services Agreement. And it shows proposals that are specific increases on top of the notional amount, some with regard and some without regard to fiscal 20, which is the year over which we had been discussing all of this, and some of which relate exclusively to fiscal 21, leaving fiscal 20 at the same level as fiscal 18. Compared with the proposal from Vermont NEA pegged to its actual calculated cost of the services that we agree it should provide. And I'll leave it at that and ask Jeff if you have what would you like to present to the board this evening? I assume you have something because you're taking time to actually attend this meeting.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, everyone. And nice to meet you, John. So I'm not gonna. I have a written document and two documents, in fact, that I'll share with you after I finish. But I thought I'd lead in. So I'm here tonight, trying to, in an attempt really to put this behind us. We've been at this for a couple of years of trying to figure out what Vermont NEA will be compensated pursuant to its agreement with VEHI. And since the partnership was established some 2 decades ago, Vermont NEA's, and until 2018, Vermont NEA and VSBIT were funded as a percentage of work time each employee, if you will, devoted to VEHI. And that funding formula also assigned percentages for allocating certain reimbursements for office space, mileage, and other things of the nature, overhead costs. In 2017, for reasons I don't need to belabor here, Vermont NEA's funding was cut for FY18 from $275,000 down to $191,000. And I think there's about a 30% reduction. And so the latter figure was adopted by calculating 80% of Mark Hage's time, plus the cost of some support services. The FY18 service agreement total declined significantly from the previous years, largely because of the elimination of funding for VEHI services for other Vermont NEA folks, our UNISERV directors, me, the communications director, and other sorts of things. In FY19, Vermont NEA's reimbursement level remained flat at 191. And this past year in FY20, it again stayed flat at 191. The Vermont NEA service agreement runs for only 1 year without any renewal. It has no mechanism for automatic increase based on inflation or added organizational costs, either staff or overhead, to provide services to VEHI. The most recent VSBIT contract, for example, by contracts, runs for a term of 5 years plus 2 automatic renewals for 3 years, so an 11-year contract, essentially. During the first year of the contract in 2014-15, VSBIT was compensated $820,000, man, I can't speak, funding from VEHI to VSBIT for staff services based on the percentage of time each VSBIT employee devotes to VEHI work. I believe the VSBIT compensation stands at $1.1 million now for FY20. And I think it's time to move the conversation along and put this renewal discussion behind us, but in a way that reestablishes the level of fairness between the two parties that serve VEHI since its inception. My attached proposal by between Vermont NEA and VEHI is such an attempt. It calls for Vermont NEA's reimbursement for Mark services and a portion of his admin costs at 85% for the 3 years starting July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2023. So it's a 3-year proposal at 85%. Last year I was at 90%. I've reduced it to 85. I'm trying to make some headroads here. The COVID pandemic has made painfully clear to me that we're all very fragile in our health, and we should plan ahead for our successors in a manner that gives stability to VEHI and its critical partners, VSBIT and Vermont NEA. The attached proposal is a reduction from the proposal I made last November, but it does maintain the equity with VSBIT in how the reimbursement is made to Vermont NEA. In other words, it calculates the cost at percentage, in this case 85% of Mark's work at Vermont NEA as a VEHI trust administrator, plus the cost of some support services and overhead. So I'm happy to send this to you. I understand that Tracy made a proposal and a notion of, I'm trying to get to the contract here.
Tracy's is in the materials for
Right.
possible proposal tonight.
Correct. And I agreed with your proposal, Tracy, in section 2.8, or yeah, 2.8, I think is it. Sorry. I agree with your language change, I shall say, Tracy, that has us giving a written quarterly report. And that is found, I believe.
Tracy, I see your hand.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
But I'm not going to, I'm not
Section
recommending.
2.8, Tracy, adopt your written quarterly reports about specific activities on behalf of VEHI. So I agree with that change. I suggest a 3-year agreement based on 85% of Mark's time. So with that, I'll conclude, and I will push send and send everybody this document, which is the 2 handouts.
That would help. Can you tell us what the dollar figures are each year?
It is. So in FY21, 215,209. In FY22, $214,739. And in FY23, 225,847. You'll note in FY22 it actually reduces because of some changes in staffing here. So it actually reduces, or some changes here, I'll say that, from 215 in FY21 to 214 in 22, and then changes back to 225 in FY23.
Okay, for purposes of getting a discussion underway, is there a motion to adopt the revised proposal as offered by Jeff Fannin?
So I'd like to make that proposal.
Peggy moves.
I move that we adopt the proposal that Jeff has just presented us for this service agreement for Vermont NEA.
Is there a
I'll
second?
it. I'll second it.
Thank you.
Jeff, I didn't receive it. Did you include me on that so I can have it, the information for the minutes?
I think it's just being sent now. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, I just sent it.
Laura, obviously we'll make sure.
Okay, thank you.
One of the remaining 8 of us will get it to you.
I don't need 8 of them, just 1.
Then, all right, then I will open up a discussion of the memo, and I'll recognize Peggy as the main.
If I may, just Laura, I sent to everybody a minute ago. The only person I didn't was Chris, and Chris, I'm sorry, I don't have your email automatically. It didn't come up on my tablet here, so I apologize. But it's to Bobby.
She looks like she'll manage without it. Okay. For purposes of beginning discussion, I'll offer the maker of the motion an opportunity to speak in favor of it, and then we'll move on to others. Tracy, you'll be next in line.
Thanks, folks. I have to say, when I looked at the agenda for today, a few days ago, I thought, oh boy, here we go again. So I'm really grateful for Jeff's proposal that I think is finding some compromise of issues that we've discussed before. And so I would like to take a minute. I've got some thoughts and might let you know where I stand exactly.
Can you hold on, Tracy? Could you, if that's a physical problem, fine. If not, could you lower your hand? I know that I said that I'll call on you next.
You
All
said
right.
that before you called on Peggy and called for a motion, so I just want to make sure I'm going to be recognized.
Well, thank you, Peggy.
Okay, I'd like to speak plainly about Jeff's proposal and maybe a little bit more bluntly than I normally would. I support this proposal, even though I believe the loss of additional funding is without merit and honestly is mean-spirited in some ways. But I want to settle this tonight. Jeff has given us again a way to do that. I'm fed up, truly, with the arguing over this issue. It's been 2 years now. I'm tired of coming to the end of these meetings with no idea why one side of this partnership gets treated in one way, and when it comes to funding, and the other gets treated differently, especially if you look at what Jeff will actually referenced of the last 20 years and the change that's occurred in 2018, 19, and 20. I did volunteer to serve on this board when I was asked to make a difference, to help make VEHI work again for all of us through governance equality, to partner in good faith with everyone on the board, regardless of their institutional affiliations. I believe I've demonstrated that in my time on the board. I certainly hope that I have. The incredible imbalance in the funding approaches for our 2 service organizations just can't continue as it is. If Jeff's funding proposal fails tonight, I feel obligated to go to the Vermont NEA Board of Directors, the folks who appointed me, who asked me to serve in this role, and to my fellow union members, and to express my disappointment if it should fail. And my growing concern, truly, that maybe it's time for us to look in other possibilities. Concern that we take a look at whether VEHI can truly function as a partnership. Perhaps there's some better way, a different system of providing health insurance benefits to school districts and school employees that's grounded in equality of representation. It's one of the things that had been a strong point of this organization, and one in which those who do work for VEHI, no matter which group they work from, feel respected and valued. That's not currently the case. If we're going to continue to have this argument every meeting over the funding for Vermont NEA's contribution to VEHI, then let's publicly acknowledge there's a very serious problem that has nothing to do with money. And let's all consider whether it's time to move beyond VEHI. I don't know what move beyond VEHI means. It's been raised by fellow members, and maybe it's time to take a serious look at that. But I know that I can't keep feeling the way that I have at these meetings every time the situation comes up. Something needs to change. I will vote for the compromise proposal that Jeff offered because it'll allow us to move forward. I really urge each and every one of you to do the same. It's a fair proposal. It meets you in the middle. I think it's time for us to move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Tracy?
Thank you, Peggy, for sharing that. And I know that this has been a frustrating subject of conversation. And I do think there are some fundamental values and beliefs about what our role is as a board that we really need to talk through in order to be able to move forward positively. I disagree that the reasons for the change in the agreement terms in 2017 were as they were presented by Joel, and they were based upon a board level careful review of the actual services provided and the information Mark provided about his services being at the 80% level in 2017. Since 2017, members of the board have been seeking to increase clarity about what the services are that VEHI is performing and, Vermont NEA is providing to the partnership, evidence and opportunities to reflect on those services. And we've tried a number of strategies to add clarity to define what we want from this service provider so that we can determine what is appropriate in terms of compensation. I don't find that significantly different from the treatment of VisBit as a contracted service provider, and would add that VisBit also refunds. They're audited every year, and the actual amount of services provided for VEHI is calculated, and the amounts are trued up at the end of the year and refunded. The arrangements between the two service providers and the services that are provided are different, therefore the terms of the agreement should be different. Until we can increase clarity about what the services are from VEHI and get evidence that will help us to evaluate those services and to the extent to which they meet VEHI's needs, I am not comfortable with more than a one-year agreement. I do tremendously appreciate Jeff's willingness to move forward with a quarterly written report that will help us to understand those services and move forward as a team to figure out how we true that up and balance the cost of those services and the needs. But note that we still have work to do after we have those quarterly reports to begin to better define the scope of services so that we can better define the terms of the contract. And as an individual, not on behalf of the board, I am certainly willing to consider terms similar to VEHI's, such as an annual audit and a truing up of the actual costs, provided we have some clear agreements and evidence of what the work being provided is. So I understand that this is a frustrating subject. It is not about respect and value, and I understand that folks feel that it is. Our obligation is to see that an organization is well run, and that means ensuring that there are contracts that are clear, fair, and accountable, and our vendors are accountable, and that applies not only to Vermont NEA, it applies to VEHI, it applies to Blue Cross Blue Shield and others. And I feel it's our obligation, particularly given the disconnect that was observed in 2016 between the services that VEHI had been paying for and the services that were actually delivered, that we improve our articulation of what the service agreement is and align our compensation appropriately to that. Appreciate the step forward, and I'd be happy to support a one-year agreement with that additional language and with an inflationary increase.
When you're not listening.
Yeah.
Tracy,
Joel,
Are you done? Peggy, did you want to follow up?
yeah, I'm not sure what the proper protocol is here, but I just think that some people have been far more tactful in their reference to 2016 and 2017, but I think everybody here at the table is clear on what happened in 2016 and 2017 that changed the board, the VEHI board's decision to look at evidence as presented by all the partners. VEHI runs well because of a partnership between Vermont NEA and VIS. And because of that, I think that they certainly should be treated fairly and equitably going forward. When we've looked at any other contract for Blue Cross Blue Shield, for VisBit, for any of the other ones, we've accepted the evidence that they've presented. There has not been an in-depth scrutiny in the 2 years that I've served on this board. When it comes to a Vermont NEA service agreement, the level of evidence that all of a sudden needs to be provided is very different than what's required of the other groups. So disrespect or whatnot, this group will not function well without both Vermont NEA and VisBit. Both of those entities deserve to be treated equally.
I have a question for each of us. Has everyone been able to read this year's evaluation submitted by VisBit and Vermont NEA? Has anybody not done so?
I haven't done so recently.
No, I'll be honest, and I have not done so.
Well, then I will be blunt as usual. I don't understand how we can discuss whether or not Vermont NEA is meeting some standard of excellence or quality or category of service without reviewing the document that we as a board, at your insistence, Tracy, required Vermont NEA to submit in April. I don't understand how we can be expected to reach the conclusion that you reached without reviewing it carefully, I guess. I don't know. Anybody else want to else add in here? Anything from, no obligation, but we do have other board members, Zach and Lisa, I guess in particular. I'm asking you guys. Hold off. Okay, I'm doing that because you're in that portion of my screen. I'm sorry. Tracy?
My recollection, and I can go back to prior notes, is that we did have a thorough discussion and review of the evaluation earlier this year. And John Pandolfo, who's no longer on the board, raised some concerns that led to the discussion about a wish to clearly articulate the service deliverables so that we could improve our system. So I just don't want it implied that people didn't do that. It's just not fresh.
Well, let me ask anybody else for their memories. We met in January. When did we next meet?
So you had a March meeting that was canceled because of COVID.
Right.
The materials were submitted on electronically. The evaluation documents were submitted electronically in April, and I believe there was a brief discussion about them at the June meeting, and now you're meeting tonight.
You believe there was a brief discussion of the evaluations? Is that what you're saying? In
Yeah, in
June?
the context of June of renewing the contract, the same item that you're on right now, there was
Yeah,
a
I
brief
understand.
discussion. I don't think it was extensive. You're asking memories. I don't think it was extensive as in prior years, but there was a brief discussion about it in June.
Okay. Jeff, do you remember how much effort you guys put into that evaluation? And why?
Yeah, I mean, and Mark and I prepared.
This is for Zach and Lisa and John's benefit more than.
Yeah, I mean, my recollection is that it took us several days. Mark and I went back and forth and a lot of conversation and email. And as you can imagine, this all, it's a bit fuzzy given all the COVID activities of late, but to be honest with you, it was not an insignificant amount of work to go through and review what Mark had done over the previous year, to examine his timesheets. I had my business manager look at that. So we went through and I think scrubbed it pretty thoroughly about what Mark had done on behalf of VEHI. And I think the analysis back then was that his time was in excess of 90%. And my initial offer last year was at, I think, 85. Then for last fiscal year, this year was at 90 and 90. It's a 3-year deal. And I'm just, we're willing to sort of go back and say 85 is, if we can get this thing done, let's get it done and move on. I mean, there's a lot going on. Healthcare is always a big issue, but we put a lot of work into the evaluation.
Yeah, this is a partnership organization with VISBIT, Vermont EA, and VEHI. And it'd be nice, from my standpoint, if we could ultimately behave as a partnership of the 3 organizations and not feel as though one organization is being left to the side. Tracy, you're looking through stuff. Laura, let me ask again. We met in March, or no, we didn't meet in March.
No, you had a meeting in March.
And it doesn't matter because the evaluations were submitted for April 15th.
They're due in April. They anticipated an April board meeting, which we also did not have because of
Thank
COVID.
you. So in fact, the only time we've met since January is June 8th.
Correct. Correct.
And you say you remember our having a discussion of the substance of these evaluations or the fact that they had been submitted? I don't remember any discussion of the substance of the evaluations.
I believe
and none appears in your minutes. So I don't know.
correct, because I was asked to keep my minutes briefer when the board changed, and so I haven't put in the discussions other than say there was one.
Did you say that?
I recall that this was John Pandolfo's first cycle on the board to deal with this issue, and that he raised some concerns or questions that were not answered because the board did not have a time to go through the evaluation. But I believe that they were touched on in June. That is my memory. I don't know if other people have different memories. I didn't come prepared to think about exactly what happened in June, but you asked, so I'm telling you what I remember.
Yeah, I'm looking at the minutes and I don't see a reference to the word evaluation. Okay. Lisa.
As the new man on the block, I pretty sure I sounded like a fool, but I remember asking something about, it sounds like Mark does an awful lot of work, or it had something to do, there was some reference to him making a quarterly presentation or report. But besides that, I don't remember any discussion about his actual performance, if that's the issue. Does that make any sense?
Yep. Yeah, John asked for quarterly reports, and I think because he felt that he didn't have enough information yet, even after reading the first cycle of evaluations.
All right, let's not characterize what John.
Well, yeah, I don't recall that.
Laura, unless you have a distinct memory of it, and even then it wouldn't count because he's not here. He's not on this board. So nobody is copping to poring over these evaluations that were required to be submitted. Okay, Zach.
So when were those part of the June I'm just trying to figure out when I had access to these
This,
evaluations.
again, I did not mean my question to come across as an accusation. It
No,
is-
no, but I understand it's a fair question, Joel.
I
It's like
don't think-
if we're going to make a decision about the contract, Zach, have you reviewed
I
the
couldn't-
evaluation?
I
I'm not
couldn't-
even aware of the evaluation.
I couldn't agree
So-
more. They were not even included in the board materials for June 8th, but they are available to us online.
In the Dropbox, I would assume. Okay,
There's a folder, service agreement evaluations by year, and they're in there.
perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What I can find that might add a little context was the November meeting when we were discussing the contract, and the goal of much of the discussion, regardless of what you think we concluded about what actions were to be taken, was that it would be potentially a good service to the VEHI board and Vermont NEA itself to add some clarity about the deliverables and what we expect to be done. And we did propose some deliverables, and again, without revisiting whether or not the process followed what everybody thought it should follow. We did present some deliverables. Those were ultimately rejected, and what we were able to reach some consensus on was the quarterly written reports as a starting place, in my mind, to move us towards deliverables. So again,
I'm shaking my head a bit, Tracy, because that's just not how it played out. You drafted deliverables that, in my personal opinion, were really way out there. We never discussed them. I don't know who rejected them.
I specifically remember discussion about the parts of the deliverables that Mark in particular, I don't remember Jeff, felt were not doable.
You may have had some private conversation with Vermont NEA about it, but the board has not touched on your proposal. And I remember in June, John Pandolfo saying, in essence, his proposal would supplant that proposal, at least for the time being. That's how I interpreted John's language proposal.
I agree with that.
That's what happened. Nobody rejected anything that I'm aware of.
I remember specific components that were discussed.
I do not, and I don't think it matters. Other than that, we should have more clarity, I guess, in our minutes about various agreements that we reached. I'm looking here at a piece of paper, again, hoping to fashion some sort of compromise out of this so that we can leave this meeting saying, at long last, we acted as a board in concert with one another about this issue. I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to try again. This is about, I will say without fail, this is about my 6th attempt at this. And so I don't harbor any particular illusion about success. The reason for that is that success requires at least 2 votes from Lisa, Peggy, and me, and both you, Tracy, and you, Zach, to reach agreement. We cannot advance otherwise. So I'm going to try something. And I don't know if Vermont NEA is going to like it. I don't like it, but I'm going to try it anyway. I want to start by noting that for some reason, we gave up talking about fiscal 20 altogether when fiscal 20 was nearing an end. Even your proposal, Tracy, last year contemplated a nominal increase, but an increase in fiscal 20. Your most recent proposal ignores even that and just leaps right over fiscal 20 to fiscal 21 and leaves it at a percentage increase. So, we know now that the hallmark of what is acceptable to Vermont NEA is some measure not unlike that used with VISBIT, and that is to take a calculation of the actual cost of proposed services and put it in the contract, not a naked percentage increase that has no current relationship to anything other than an ancient number, however that ancient number was arrived at. And so what I'm going to suggest is I mean, I'll start with a multi-year agreement and see if it gets anywhere, but I'm going to suggest that we go along with forfeiting any increase for fiscal 20. That we adhere to the quarterly report language that is new and proposed by, I presume, John and you, Tracy, but I don't know that. John made the formal presentation initially and you made it this month, so I'll assign that to both of you. That imposes new obligations on Vermont NEA. That we fund it at this is, I guess, a two-part thought here, so forgive me. I shouldn't say I'm articulating anything. I'm going to spout something here. The amount to be paid, this is part A, the amount to be paid for fiscal 21 is the amount found in Vermont NEA's proposal as presented by Jeff this evening. Not a percentage increase, but an amount based on the calculated cost of services, just as we provide VISBIT. And just as we arrange with VISBIT, we can audit that amount at the end of the year, post fact, and true up, so that we don't end up overspending or underspending, I guess. And that seems to me would accommodate a little bit of everybody here. I don't know where else we can possibly go. I think it should be a multi-year agreement. I think for our collective sanity and for the respect that this organization ought to have outside of our board meetings, that we ought to leave this debate behind for a couple of years. And so I would extend this to both fiscal 22 and 23 in accordance with the amounts that Jeff proposes for Vermont NEA, accompanied by quarterly reports about services and by an annual true up by whatever language we need to develop an annual true up.
So, Joe,
Laura,
there is a motion on the floor.
it's Peggy's motion.
Yep. And I believe the only way you've amended that is to have an audit and a true up. Otherwise, you're taking the quarterly report language that Jeff agreed to and the years. And
Yeah, I understand you're the note taker and that's how you characterize it. I would do anything but characterize those two concessions as onlys. They're serious.
But it's already in, I'm not talking about concessions. I'm talking about the change you're recommending to Peggy's motion. Peggy's motion already included
Understood.
reports, 3 years, Jeff's amounts.
Understood. What I'm suggesting is an amendment to Peggy's motion that would do what you just said.
Thank you.
Although, except this, Peggy's motion already contemplates the quarterly report language.
That's right.
So it's only the true up that would be, I guess, changed. And that's in an effort to accommodate Tracy's expressed interest in our not being on the hook, I guess, for having paid too much money. If in effect, the array of services doesn't measure up to what was promised, I guess.
Right. So just to clarify for the minutes, you've made a motion to amend Peggy's motion that would add an audit.
I have not made a motion.
Okay, thank you.
It's in the context of discussing and in the hopes that a motion with a real chance of success will follow.
Yeah.
If I need to put it in a motion, then that'll become clear in the next minute and a half, I suspect.
Thank you.
Tracy.
I just want to suggest that true up, which I really appreciate the interest that we move towards, can't be successful until we have clear agreement about the services that we're getting. And part of, Joel, relax, can I finish? I might make you happy if you give me a chance. Or say something that you could build off positively. A true up can be successful when we have clear agreement about what the services are that are being provided. And part of the challenges with the past evaluations that I think we've tried to bring up are that some of the work that Mark is doing or that is part of the overall service agreement that is incorporated in the evaluation is very important healthcare work, right? It's important, it's valuable, and it is work that Vermont NEA can and should pursue. It's not necessarily the work that VEHI is contracting for. And so as we look to the future, I would love to get to a true up. I just think a first step is adding that clarity around what is the work that VEHI is contracting for and what are the other services that Vermont NEA is doing related to healthcare or anything else that's none of VEHI's business and it's not what we're going to pay for. And that's also the kind of balance and clarity that we seek with VisBit, which also has other work that they do that have nothing to do with VEHI and that are outside of the scope of the work. I see the quarterly reports, Jeff, as a really positive step in terms of giving us information that would allow us to have a thoughtful conversation about how to move forward in that direction. So my intent is to agree with the direction that you're going and hope we can talk about a productive way that gets there.
I'm always casting myself sometimes in the role of responding or reacting. And I'm sorry I reacted visually there. My reaction, though, is based on having reviewed the evaluation documents this year, and with an awareness of the draft so-called deliverables, Tracy, that you presented to us back in January. And it's not like they're night and day, but they are from different planets. There's night and day on all planets. We can't do anything close as a group, VEHI, to what you suggested Mark Hage handle alone on our behalf. I believe, and I'm not going to put people on the spot, but I believe anybody who has reviewed those draft deliverables will come away with the conclusion that some of this is okay, some of it is really a bridge too far, but all of it is shared responsibilities between our two partners with us, VEHI. It's not Vermont NEA's task alone. That was what I was left with on reviewing the deliverables. I reviewed the evaluations and I saw, to be blunt, a remarkable focus on both qualitative and quantitative data. And for the life of me, I would have said he's doing too much. But that's me. It's only me, and I only evaluated Mark Hage's work as his supervisor for 16 years, and I've concluded pretty much on the basis of what I know that we're getting a hell of a bargain out of this guy. So that's a say. So I don't know, Tracy, where your good faith suggestion about gaining clarity about expectations gets us in tonight's discussion. How can we possibly resolve that to your satisfaction or anybody else's satisfaction from whatever direction we come at it? I saw a couple of hands. I saw Jeff's hand. I'm not sure if I saw Mark's hand, and I see Zach.
So Tracy, I appreciate the offer is genuinely an effort to the quarterly reports to give you what you need. So I'll just say it that way. And obviously, if you're not getting what you need, that's trying to make that happen. I'm curious though as to why 1 year and 1 year only. And
well, I think I don't think she limited it to 1 year, did you, Tracy?
I thought she did, and maybe
she did initially, but then we moved on. I'm sorry, Jeff. Go ahead anyway. We'll clarify that.
You said initially 1 year, so if that's changed, then I missed that. I'm sorry, and I'm trying to figure out. What we would like is some stability, frankly, Tracy, and fairness. And VisBit's got an 11-year agreement essentially. I think any objective observer would say the two partners are not equal at this point, and there's disparity in treatment. And I'm trying to address that. I'm not asking for an 11-year deal. I'm not asking for the identical terms as Visbit has, no stretch. But I am sincere in the belief that we need some long-term stability for VEHI. We're going through a lot of challenging waters. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think it's important that we get stability and fairness in the contractual relationships.
Mark, whether you raise your hand or not, I'm going to call on Zach next. As a
No,
board.
that's fine. I'm good, Joe. I don't have.
Okay,
Okay.
Zach.
So I was curious, kind of, if Laura, again, this goes to Elizabeth talked about being the rookie on the board. Laura, if you could talk a little bit about that auditing process, because an auditing process can mean a lot of things. So what does that look like on the Visbit end in terms of trying to figure out, okay, here's what we thought we were going to spend. Here's what you guys actually did. How do you document it? Who's doing that? What does it look like?
I'm going to, Tracy, it's all right. I'll bypass you and go straight to Chris for that one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So Zach, I'm the finance manager, so I'm the one who handles the corporate books for both organizations, in full. So I'm probably the best to speak to that, although Laura is, privy to the process, but I'm the one who actually physically does the work. So when we do the audit, okay, so we are subject to an audit, an independent accounting firm each year for both Visbit and VEHI because we're nonprofit corporations. So Sullivan & Powers is the entity that does our audit. It is a financial audit, so they are trying to, they have to go in and make sure that our financial statements are represented fully and accurately. As a part of that, they do spend some time on controls because that's how it leads to them being able to certify that the financial audits are being presented correctly. So they are aware of this true-up procedure. It is something they look at. It's something that I physically perform. So I literally take every expense line that Visbit has, and when I develop the budget, I take every single expense that Visbit has budget-wise, and that is allocated against programs. Some expenses don't hit VEHI at all because they're not anything to do with VEHI, they're to do with our other programs. Some expenses like the wellness folks are 100% VEHI because they have nothing to do with Visbit. They 100%, and Bobby Joe, who 100% works for VEHI. That's how I base the budget. Then at the end of the year, which actually I'm working on right now, VEHI books have closed, Visbit books have not. Once Visbit books are fully closed, I literally take the exact same spreadsheet and I go and I plug all the actual costs in over the budget numbers and I calculate a variance, and that's what is returned or charged to all programs, including VEHI, including our multi-line program, including internally. Maybe that's enough. I don't know.
No,
Small question, just as an example. What do you do with mileage reimbursement? Is it spread over as a percentage of?
Okay, so mileage is, so I do some things through Visbit admin expense, and then of course we have a VEHI checking account. So when the wellness people go out and have their mileage, it's paid directly from the VEHI checking account, has nothing to do with the Visbit side at all, because, if Bobby Joe has mileage and she's going out, it's coming out of the VEHI checking account directly.
Okay. Whereas with, and the same with you and Laura? Not you, the same with Laura. Yes.
Well, Laura's is paid mostly by Visbit. Most of her travel and mileage is paid by Visbit. But if she were to go on the occasional, like when we changed health plans and everybody was traveling around, go back to Joe Zimmerman for a minute here. When we changed health plan and Joe was traveling all over the state to present the new health plans, I was part of that a little bit too. Joe would have gotten a check out of the VEHI checking account for the mileage.
And what about Laura?
Laura's had very little VEHI mileage,
Okay.
but that would be the same case.
Well, but how do you allocate her VEHI mileage in this discussion? Where does it appear? does it appear as a number of miles or as a percentage of Laura's mileage reimbursement overall? How do you do that?
Well, no, they submit expense reports and they specifically say this is where I went, and it's calculated in the number of miles that were traveled to and from that location on a particular day with backup, and then it is reimbursed from the proper company.
Okay. All right. Zach, thank you.
So just the quick follow-up on that is, so then in terms of the, Chris, in terms of the internal controls, what is Sullivan and like, what are some of the internal controls that are present for Sullivan and Powers to sign off on? Let's say, you know, Laura's the clear one with the split. So what do we indicate? Maybe you don't have the answer right in front of you, but what do we use as some of the internal controls in order to say, this is why we legitimately believe this is a split?
Well, I mean, my controls procedure manual is quite lengthy.
I figured. Okay.
And quite expensive. So to ask, you know, what are my controls? That's a big question.
I apologize. Yep.
You know, there's a lot of like controls in place to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and the mileage is legitimate and all of those things. You know, it's pretty obvious what she's doing. Did she go to a VISBIT board meeting? Well, that's VISBIT mileage. I mean, those are on site, so that's a bad example. I mean, I'm really grasping at this because I'm having trouble giving an example of Laura's VEHI mileage here. Pretty much most of her mileage is VISBIT and it gets paid by VISBIT. You know, maybe we ought to talk about the electric bill. I don't know, maybe that would help.
Yeah, if you have an example of one that's like that hard, and I guess that's what I'm looking for is, what are those hard to
electric bill
differentiate?
is better, right? Try that one, Chris.
So like the electric bill. Okay, so we have a building that we have to, so we, you know, unlike, because we're supposed to charge costs, we don't charge VEHI rent to rent space for its employees and to function out of the VISBIT building, okay? So the actual costs around space are things like utilities, electricity, heat, you know, the things that go into the building, the property taxes, okay? So what we do is we take an FTE count. So we know that we have, you know, it varies sometimes depending on number of staff on hand, but in round numbers, we have 22 employees. Approximately 7.5 serve VEHI, okay? And some of those are direct. So you have your 4 wellness folks, 100% VEHI. You have Bobby Joe is 100% VEHI. And then you have a portion of Laura, myself, Angela, who's my accounting assistant, Lisa, who's admin, and Lorraine, who's our IT coordinator. We base those percentages based on time studies. So we know that we spend X amount of our time on VEHI matters versus VISBIT matters. So you take that whole overall count, you take 7.5 divided by the 22, you get a percentage, and that is the percentage of the electric bill that VEHI is allocated, and the rest of it stays on VISBIT's books.
We have 25.
With an adjustment for the training room. With an adjustment for the training room, actually, because we use the training room for other things that aren't VEHI. So we take a percentage right off the top for the training room before we even allocate out to VEHI. This is for the office space area. So I spend a lot of time on this. You know, you talk about Mark and Jeff spending a lot of time. Believe me, I spend a lot of time on this. My processes are very, very, very well documented. You know, the auditors have looked at these things for years, and
Chris,
my percentages, and I get
nobody, as far as I know, had the least question or doubt about that. That wasn't the basis of the question at all.
I know. I'm not getting defensive.
But I will point out that you have a counterpart at Vermont NEA, who, while she doesn't spend nearly as much time on VEHI as you do, spends a portion of her time uncompensated on VEHI. Zach, did you want to follow up? Oh, we can't hear you.
No, I think that's that's what I'm trying to, I guess the follow-up, Chris, is on time studies. How long, is that just a periodic time study? Like you guys have a couple week thing that's a snapshot, or is that an ongoing accounting of time? What's that look like?
So we tracked our time, the 5 of us tracked our time for the entirety of FY20. every day for
Permit.
365 days a year. Before that, we don't do it every year. I mean, it's a big deal to write down everything you do every day, but we did do our time study for 365 days, the entirety of FY20.
Mark, how many years have you been keeping timesheets?
Let's see, I'm in my 20th year with VEHI. I'm in my 25th year with Vermont NEA. So 25 years of timesheets.
Every day.
So just to be clear, at least for me, I did every 15 minutes, and I didn't just write VEHI Visbit, but I wrote specifically what within VEHI Visbit, because my time gets also cut up in Visbit. What goes to multi-line, what goes to unemployment, what goes to general.
That's fine. How you do it is, as far as I'm concerned, is your business. I've never been given any reason to doubt the
Right.
legitimacy of what Visbit tells us, nor have I any doubt about the legitimacy of what Vermont NEA has told us. Peggy.
If I may.
Jeff first. He was in. Go ahead.
So just Vermont NEA does it the same way. We keep track of our hours. Mark, me, everybody in the office. Not only are we, like you, we're audited by Mudgett, Jeanette, Crow, and Wisner. Sounds very similar. The only thing that we do that you perhaps don't do is we file reports with the U.S. Department of Labor, LM2s. And so we're subject to their requirements as well. So I think collectively.
How long is that form?
In excess of 100 pages.
Okay. I mean, we shouldn't. This isn't dueling partners. This is just.
No.
Each organization has legitimate and serious components to its work around fiscal management. Peggy.
That was my point in the original motion. Both of these organizations are credible organizations. We're very fortunate to have qualified, dedicated people that work very hard on the behalf of this VEHI organization. And I think they should be treated equally. That was the intent of my motion. Treat them equally. They are well-respected, hard-working organizations with quality people in them. Let's vote and settle this tonight, please.
We have 21 minutes before Tracy leaves us. That deprives us of a quorum. If we reach that point, and of course we have the rest of the agenda that we're not going to get. I don't know what to say. I feel like I'm talking to a video screen. I don't know how to resolve ever this ongoing, interminable, amorphous discussion about standards, as though the work that Visbit or Vermont NEA performs for us on our behalf and on behalf of 40,000 Vermonters is in any way questionable. But it is, or it has appeared to be that way, Tracy, to you, and I don't know how to resolve it. We've tried a number of ways, and so if I offer an amendment to Peggy's basic proposal, which is Vermont NEA's proposal, without some assurance that it's going to pass, then I'm not going to make that motion, and we'll just vote on Peggy's motion. But I need some indication from some source that we can pass something that achieves what I suggested. A multi-year agreement, quarterly reports, annual true-ups by whatever name, foregoing any increase for fiscal 20. And I have no idea what more to do. The clarity of services, the array of services that Bobby Joe and Laura have performed and Mark performs are known to us all. They're not known in detail because none of us, as far as I know, attends any of their work out in the field. A lot of Mark's work, and I presume Bobby Joe's work, is the coronavirus notwithstanding, with school districts, with school district employees, with VEHI members and subscribers. If there's any doubt about that, I have heard it from no source, nowhere, except, frankly, Tracy, you and you alone. Only you. I just haven't heard any complaints about Mark's services. I haven't heard any complaints about Bobby Joe's services or Laura's services. There were a lot of complaints about, in the screw up in the transfer of plans and getting people's benefits paid, but that wasn't their responsibility. And they've put in yeoman work to put that crisis behind us all.
So I think I just.
Let me interrupt you for a second and ask you,
go ahead.
as a superintendent, have you heard any complaints about the quality of VEHI services, either from VISBIT or Vermont NEA?
I think, people complain.
Don't pull a Bill Barr on me, what the word suggests.
Oh, no. Oh, a lot of people say. No, I'm not going to, but I mean, do people complain about health insurance and where it comes from?
That's not my
Yeah. But people aren't, I think most members are not, and this is not disparaging of members, people aren't thinking in depthly about
they have lives
what the makeup of the partnership is, how it works, what the mechanics of it are. We have certain staff members who do understand those types of things, but not the vast majority of people. Most people don't have a large judgment. They generally might bemoan aspects of how they wish certain things were different ways, but they don't. The level of specificity into the inner workings of the organization, I think, are limited to a few people in each district.
But I mean, I happen to believe, without knowing it, that each of these people has spent some time in Springfield. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mark's been down for stuff. Absolutely.
We've all been there.
Have you ever heard a complaint about what he does? Ever? I never have, and I know.
Yeah, I don't, and I don't know about, but I don't know if that's the measure, Joel. Right? I mean, like,
I understand that.
Do I have a revolution amongst Springfieldites? They're like, God, that Mark, awful. No, right. But is that the measure of what?
It's not the entire measure, no.
Right.
But it certainly is part of it. All right, Tracy, we got less than 16 minutes. What are we going to do? You're up.
All right, just want to go back and reiterate that an area where I think we universally have identified an area that VEHI needs to improve is employee education. And that is an area that is primarily contracted for part of the service agreement with Vermont NEA. And I'd love to talk about ways we can improve in that area. Whether it means additional resources or a different plan or reallocating how we use the resources we have, but that's the fundamental piece. That is a sticking point in the service agreement and the lack of detail in the service agreement that is leading to misperception.
By you.
Joel,
Right. I mean, you're not aware of other people with that same perception.
No, I am aware of other people with that same perception.
I've asked you this before. I've never heard of any.
So then,
I'm ready to end the meeting. I might need to take a break. So,
Peggy,
I guess
before you take a break, Tracy, let me. I'm looking to help us all avoid having to do this every meeting episode, right? That's fair. Do we share that goal?
Absolutely.
What are we going to do? I will tell you that in reviewing the evaluation that Vermont NEA produced, I found a hell of a lot of stuff about employee education. And I don't know what more it is you're interested in seeing Vermont NEA do, or what more you're interested in seeing both partners do. That's a discussion we can have, but not in this. I mean, I realize the context is money, but this is not the way we can get at that issue.
It's a conversation that I presented drafts for consideration previously over many meetings. I really want to do a good job with this. I care about the organization. I care about the people on this board. I care about our ability to govern ourselves effectively. and implement normal operational procedures and disagree heartily and come to consensus and stand behind a decision that maybe we didn't all fully agree with, but we can live with it because it's in the best interest of the organization. And it's really hard for me to participate when I get interrupted and I feel like I'm demeaned. And I know you feel the same way. But even the blaming of the contract on me personally is insulting and absurd. It was a board decision based on a review of evidence, including information provided from executive
Tracy,
directors and Mark.
No, that's not true.
It's fair to say we can
No, it's
agree
not.
to disagree.
I
There is
have
no,
the evidence here.
Not true.
listen, those of us who were present are entitled to differences of opinion about what transpired. My suggestion is to try to let go of that and see if we can figure out where to go for the next 3 years. Peggy.
Tracy and I seem to have the same level of frustration. I hear it in her voice, and it's certainly been clear in mine. So Tracy, I'm asking, can we pass the motion that I made? I'm happy to put in the audits that Joe recommended as well for the 3 years so that we can, as a board, move forward. If you have feedback data that tells us that we need improved education, then let's move past this so that we can get to that conversation. It would be such a huge step in the right direction.
Zach.
So I agree that stability makes sense, right? My only concern is that if there's a need to think about, the fact that costs have increased, whatever happened in 17, and I haven't been part of the war of 17 or 16 or whatever it was, but that costs have increased and that we need to make some type of adjustment. I'm a little uncomfortable, and I think you can see in my questions, I'm trying to gauge the extent to which we ask for non-self-assessment stuff from VSBIT, and to what extent. So if I had a contractor through my district, and I asked them to do a building project, I wouldn't ask them to come back to me with a self-assessment of whether or not they thought they did a great job.
Of course.
Right? I would have some other means of feeling like I had some way to try to trust but verify that was what was occurring. So I'm trying to understand to what extent we expect that of VSBIT, because I don't want to hold Vermont NEA to a different standard, right, than VSBIT. But I would want Vermont NEA to be held to at least the same standard as VSBIT in terms of the delivery of services. So that's why my questions are driving towards, I'm trying to understand what is that standard, and then if in getting to that standard, because I would want, if it's deliverables, and if we feel like there are not deliverables for VSBIT, then I'd want deliverables for VSBIT. I'd want to say, this is my agreement with VSBIT. This is what I expect from VSBIT, and I can verify at the end of a year whether or not that happened and to what extent that the investment we made was worth it for all the members of VEHI. And the same thing for Vermont NEA, but I want to be in both cases with both organizations, and I'm still trying to grasp to what extent I can do this. I want to be able to say, I feel like I can, I have mechanisms in place to semi-independently verify what is happening. And I'm still unclear as to that on both sides. But I wouldn't be comfortable with saying, well, I'm not clear on Vermont NEA, and so I don't want to be clear on VSBIT either, and it's cool because we've been partners for a long, long time, and we have a great history either. So.
15-second history. Before the school boards were a formal part of the association, it was VSBIT and Vermont NEA together. And to be blunt, we trusted each other because we had no reason not to trust each other, because we worked together hand in glove, and every year we made these decisions in concert around a table at J. Morgan's in Montpelier over oatmeal for breakfast. Laura, really quickly, and then I'm going to try again.
So,
Follow up on what Peggy said.
we provide financial services, and you see the results of the audit. We're audited by DFR every 5 years. They look at whether we've done all the things we said we're going to do. We can provide you with all the member agreements. You can look at the website where we have the member agreements, the bylaws. We keep track of the policies, the board minutes. We do a wellness program. You can go into the path. You can see and participate in the wellness program. Even if you are not a school employee. We make sure every VEHI board member can do that. We make products and documents available to you throughout the
Okay.
year as part of our evaluation.
Oh, thank you. Forgive my cutting you short, but you make the case. With respect to Vermont NEA, Zach, what you'll find is pretty much Mark Hage's services and those of his secretary that are attached to Mark Hage's VEHI services and mileage. I think that's about it. So you're not going to, there's not a lot more to look for. In terms of external evaluations, maybe we can have some survey of members. I mean, I know how it comes out, but maybe Vermont NEA could ask its local leadership to write something for your satisfaction. And I'm not suggesting you don't have a good point to make there. That it's legitimate. You want to know what you're spending money on, and it's quality as well as its quantity. But it might help if you read the evaluations, even though they're self-evaluations. They reflect an enormous amount of effort on both parts, and not only effort to produce them, but they reflect well, I think, on VEHI itself. And beyond that, I don't know what we can do. We don't have the resources to have somebody follow Mark or Bobby Joe around the state to measure what they're doing, according to some objective instrument, that doesn't work that way in the real world. All right, here we are, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Is there, I don't want a fudge factor. I don't want us to be exposed to more conversation that could lead us down a rabbit hole that doesn't permit us to resolve this funding discussion for a 3-year period. But if we added a commit, I don't know what to do, Tracy, about employee education. Your deliverables included reference to Mark having to produce videos. I mean, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know Mark. I know Mark real well. I don't think he's ever produced a video in his life.
You wouldn't want to see what I did produce.
And really, what good with that? And other things. I don't know what more we can expect of Mark, and particularly, to be blunt, in the environment in which we're currently operating. You tell me the extent to which your students are going to be able to feel fully educated in this environment, right? I mean, and then we'll all turn defensive about that and say, oh, well, of course we'll be able to do that. But nevertheless, we're all in a different world right now. Peggy made a good faith motion. I think Jeff's proposal was, yielded on fiscal 20, which saves money that isn't the issue here, and demonstrates a decline in anticipated costs next year, and adding the quarterly report language and some audit reference. I don't know what more can be done in order for us to be able to proceed at long last to start talking about the issues that are, once again, not even going to be able to be raised here because we're running out of time. That's the meat of what VEHI does. Is not found in our discussions about minutes and the Vermont NEA service agreement. And that's the real tragedy of the last year for us. We have a lot of work to do, and we are not getting it done. Or at least the staff is getting it done and the board is not fully informed about it. I feel comfortable about it because I know these guys well. So, Tracy, any thoughts about a sentence, not paragraphs, a sentence that might lead us to the conclusion that we can adopt Peggy's motion as it would be modified by Peggy in accordance with the two elements we talked about? I guess it's just the one element.
Because I feel like we can only be successful if we can increase clarity about what we're expecting for services for VEHI. I am not comfortable with an agreement that's more than 1 year that doesn't have that. I am comfortable comfortable with an agreement that is 1 year, that takes us a step in that direction. And I appreciate Jeff's willingness to agree to quarterly reports, which would be foundational for us to be able to have conversations about the services that are being provided and whether or not they're a good fit with what VEHI
All right.
alternate service agreement.
I appreciate the movement you just made. If I understand it correctly, we might be able to pull it off before you have to say goodbye. And that is that in spite of the fact that we're still going to have to deal with this about fiscal 22, and that's coming up sooner than we'd like to admit, that you're willing to adopt what amounts to Peggy's motion for year one, and with the addition of some, I didn't, some true up language. Is that what you wanted?
I don't even need that yet.
You don't even need that.
Until
All right.
we know what we're truing up to.
All right. So
Well,
in the,
necessary.
so I'll make a motion and I'll see what happens. And the motion is an attempt at a friendly amendment, Peggy, to your motion, which would transform it from adopting Jeff Vannon's proposals for fiscal years 21 through 23, merely adopting that portion of Jeff Vannon's Vermont and Aid proposal as it relates to fiscal 21.
And what's the dollar amount of that one?
I wrote it down. It's 215,209.
Peggy, do you accept?
Don't I know what you're going through? Go ahead.
I will accept it, but I also want to make a clear statement that I'm incredibly disappointed that we were not able to work out a multi-year deal. But yes, I'll accept the amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Zach?
I would just say that I have intense interest in a multi-year agreement, right? Because there is like real work, even as a rookie, I understand there is real work that needs to be done as part of this, but I do simultaneously, like for me to get across that line, it's that conversation about what are the outcomes we're expecting, and just clarifying those outcomes, putting a dollar figure to those outcomes, and then having some ability, like the true up's not possible until you actually know what it is you're trying to true up against. And so I want to get there, Peggy. I'm in. Like, I don't want to be doing every meeting is about this service agreement and memos and whatever. Like, let's talk about actual healthcare and stuff.
You know, we all know the hallmark of a good settlement is one that nobody likes. And I will tell you that I don't like this, but well, I feel no differently from Peggy and Zach. I actually agree with what you've said as well. Although I think that our expectations in the agreement with Vermont and Aid are a little clearer than we'd like to acknowledge. All right, so I will restate the motion and call for a vote. The motion is to adopt Vermont and Aid's proposal as presented by Jeff Vannon for fiscal year 21 in the amount of $215,209, with the addition of the language on quarterly reports
2.8.
Found in section 2, paragraph 8 of the existing agreement, period.
I don't think, Joel, it's the existing agreement. I think Tracy and.
Oh, you're right. I apologize. Section 2, paragraph 8, as proposed by John Pandolfo on June 8th. And Tracy, Laura, you figure out where it first appeared. I think that John did it, but if I'm wrong, fine. The paragraph as found in Tracy Wren's offering for this meeting. Okay.
If I may, Joel, I think the language I adopted in section 2.8.
Oh, it's in your draft.
Identical to Tracy's. I just took out strike throughs or any of that.
So we don't even need to that. All right. So the motion we're acting on.
Thing is to strike FY22 and FY23 in my.
So we are acting purely on fiscal 21 in the proposal presented by Vermont and Aid. I apologize for my own confusion there. Is that clear?
Yes.
All right. Oh God, I have to ask for a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? I hear none. Thank you all very much. I truly am apologetic about the duration of this. I knew, and I'd mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, what was likely to happen, at least in general terms. I don't quite know what to do with the balance of the agenda today, other than to say we can't do it. Is that right, Laura? If Tracy already left, so we no longer have a quorum, so that seals the deal. But Laura and Bobby, Joe, and Mark, and Chris, for that matter, if you guys can, I don't know if there's a way for us to meet before October.
So we have a budget that requires action. You can take action without a meeting if you all agree unanimously. We've done it before, so we can initiate that. Chris's financials, basically you don't take action on, but you should review them because there's actually a very serious story in those financials of a looming challenge ahead of us as we set rates.
Yeah.
The board should be familiar with that, and you might, that's going to extend our October meeting. And I think our management report speaks for itself. So
Okay. All right. So what I'm about to ask you, I think, doesn't require a lot of extra work. But could you put in a memo to us what we should focus our attention on, materials that we already have? If you wanted to.
them. I think Chris's memo on the budget and Chris's memo on the finances speak for themselves, and to rewrite them doesn't make sense.
I didn't ask. I asked you to list that.
They're on the agenda. I can rewrite the agenda.
Never mind. I'll obtain it somewhere else. If we have questions about the budget, we present them to Chris. That's because I don't want to bother Chris if she's not the person to whom we should present questions about it. What's the answer?
No, I'm happy to field any questions.
All right.
I don't know if it would help the board. I could, the only change to the budget that I know right now is what we just passed. So we had the Vermont NEA service agreement in as a placeholder.
No, Chris, sitting here, I don't know what questions I had, but I know that on the document, I jotted some notes for myself. It's just points of clarification for my own edification, that's all. And I thought they might be useful for the full board. That's all right. I'll follow up with you. And if I don't follow up with you, that's even better, right? So we'll take it from there. I'm
happy to respond to if anyone emails me questions, we will respond to the questions to the entire board so that you're all receiving the same information as answers.
Oh, fine, of course.
So Joel, why don't you talk to Tracy to see if she concurs as the chair, vice chair, that you want us to initiate adoption of a budget without a meeting, or whether you want to call a meeting to adopt the budget.
This is the thing. My mind's a little fried. What I was asking you to do was sort of put on an email to me the things that you want to see happen, because I'm not going to remember this stuff. I understand that I should follow up with Tracy about.
So I can certainly email you and Tracy about your options to get a budget. That was the other action item.
Okay, got it. You're right. I understand now. It's the only other action item. All right.
And, I think that the financials, we will tell you the story when we do the rate filing in October, but you should review Chris's memo, and if you have questions about it, to her, so that you come into that October meeting, because those numbers won't change. How the fiscal year ended won't change between now and October.
Right. I see. I understand. All right. Folks, I would like to, I wish Tracy were still here. I would like to thank you all, including Tracy, for bearing up. This has been, I've been around the block, as you can tell by looking at me. I have a 42-year career of running meetings and participating in meetings and advising people and acting as a parliamentarian on occasion. This is the most difficult issue I think I've ever faced. And to make at least some headway is important, but it's also important that we didn't make enough headway on it. And so, unfortunately, as a group, we're going to have to contend with this in an ongoing manner. Zach, if you can help us determine what means employee education in ways that help us, then more power to you. I'd be thrilled to sit down with people and talk it through and see what we can come up with. But I don't understand it. It has not been clear. So, all right. We're no longer meeting, so I guess we've adjourned a few minutes earlier than this when Tracy signed off, Laura. Okay. All right. We have Laura still around for another meeting or two, I presume.
Laura?
I'm here till the end of December, and then I actually will be a support person for another 6 months.
Oh, John. I don't know. Fannin didn't, oh, I know what happened. Fannin didn't arrange that with me. But what he didn't arrange with me was my sticking around for half a year.
About reappearing.
Okay.
That's what happens.
Laura, just a quick question. So, do you want me to sign the contract? Do you want to do something special to it? I don't care. I just.
It needs to be signed. It needs to be signed by the chair and you. And I should be the one to produce the final contract. So
Okay.
that, yeah, and I'll send it to both.
I'll sign it too, right?
You could actually, gentlemen, if you want to sign the last page.
It doesn't matter if,
I'll
you
give
know.
you it'll be what you had, Jeff, minus the other 2 years.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out, I had some line things going on the left. I couldn't figure out what the heck that was.
right.
But
I can go with the original one and work with it, but I'll try to do that tomorrow. If not, I'll do it by the next day.
I'm not rushing. I thought I had you. I just get it. One thing off my plate.
All right, guys.
hear
I don't know when we'll ever lay eyes on each other in, real life, but I, believe it or not, look forward to that day very much. So,
And
I
Jeff,
guess,
Joel, you'll get me the pharmacy one settlement contract to sign that too.
especially if you don't get it, you follow up with me.
Yeah, I will.
That'd be great. I'll get it to you almost immediately upon receiving the follow-up. I know that. That's been my practice with you.
You've been
All right,
good.
folks. Yeah, good. Thank you. Zach, I like your shirt. And everybody else is sort of different shades of light blue, gray, and white. And then there's, of course, Mark. Anyhow, I hope the beginning of school is bearable for all of you and that you turn this rotten year into a flaming success. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Joel.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you very much.